Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going deep, doing a deep dive into property development feasibility. We've got a source for you. It's called, well, it's a website all about a software suite called Lead Developer.
Oh, yeah, this software. It helps people figure out, well, from what I've seen, it helps you figure out if a property development project is going to make money, which is pretty important, right?
Definitely. I mean, you don't want to start a project and then realize, oh no, it was doomed from the start. What's really cool about this Lead Developer website is that it's not just about the software. They've got all these like insider tips and strategies for development. And get this, they have testimonials from experienced developers who've used it to make some, well, serious profits.
Oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. I'm always skeptical of software that's like, oh, this is going to solve all your problems. But if they've got some real-world success stories, that definitely makes it more believable.
Absolutely. So what we're trying to do today is by the end of this deep dive, you'll know what development feasibility is, and you'll also kind of understand the key things that make a project successful or not. And we'll look at the tools professionals use to analyze all of this. It's like a crash course in property development.
Okay, I like it. Let's get started. So the website talks a lot about develop and sell. What exactly does that mean in real estate?
Yeah, good question. You know how some developers build properties and then hold on to them, for like rental income and stuff? Well, develop and sell is the opposite. It's about building a property and then trying to sell it right away to make a quick profit.
Ah, okay, so it's all about that initial sale, not the long-term rental income.
Exactly. And that's where this lead developer software comes in. It's designed to analyze these develop and sell projects to see if they're actually, going to be financially viable.
Makes sense. And who is this software for? Is it just for big developers, or can anyone use it?
Well, the website makes a point of saying that it's designed to be user-friendly. They say even if you're a beginner, you can use it. But experienced developers can use it too, so it's kind of for everyone. Plus, they've got users all over the world. I mean, look at this list. Australia, New Zealand, USA, Canada, UK. They even have people using it in Jamaica, Fiji, even India.
That's pretty impressive. So it
Yeah.
really is a global solution.
Yeah, and get this, it's built on Google Sheets, but they say it's got like over 15,000 lines of code, and it can run a full feasibility analysis in just 6 seconds, something like that.
Wow, that's fast. I guess speed is pretty important when you're dealing with real estate.
Yeah, especially in a hot market where, things are moving quickly.
So we've talked about this software being user-friendly and being used all over the world, but what kinds of projects can it actually analyze?
Well, it seems like it's pretty versatile. I mean, they list mixed-use developments, like those big buildings that have apartments and shops and offices all mixed together.
Oh yeah, those are becoming really popular.
And then they also list apartment buildings, like regular apartment buildings and condominium projects. Oh, and even just regular single-family homes.
Interesting. So it can analyze small projects and big projects.
And don't forget about renovations. They specifically mentioned renovations and also those fix and flip projects, which are super popular right now.
Oh yeah, those fix and flips.
And they even mentioned something about subdivision projects
Mhm.
with those, those battle axe lots or those, what are they called, flag lots?
Yeah, flag-a-lots, I know what you mean.
I've always wondered how developers make those work financially. Those can be tricky.
Right. They have those weird access issues sometimes. And then, of course, there are the large-scale land development projects, the ones where they take a huge piece of land and turn it into like a whole new community.
Yeah, those are massive. And they've also got townhouse and multifamily development on their list.
So basically, if you're building something, lead developer can probably help you analyze it.
That's the idea. But what's really cool is that the software doesn't just give you numbers. It also gives you kind of like insights into each project type.
Yeah, that's what I'm really interested in. Those insights are what can help developers make better decisions.
One of the key features they talk about is the project planner. Did you get a chance to look at that?
Yeah, I did. And I love how it uses a built-in Gantt chart. It's a really visual way to plan out the timeline of a project.
And it shows you like when all the costs will happen so you can plan your funding. No surprises.
Right, no surprises. That's so important in development.
I was thinking the same thing. It's like having a crystal ball for your project's money. Another key feature they talk about is funding options, or what they call the capital stack.
Okay, now that sounds interesting.
It's all about, understanding the different ways you can get money for your project. And what's cool is that Lead Developer breaks it down into 5 different categories. They call them capital tranches.
5. Okay, let's hear them.
Okay, so first you've got the land acquisition loan. That's the money you borrow to buy the land. Then there's the construction loan for, actually building the thing. Then you've got the mezzanine loan and developer's equity and investor's equity.
Wow. So whether you're using your own money or borrowing from a bank or bringing in investors, it seems like this software can handle it all.
Yeah, it's super flexible. And they even talk about something called interest reserves, which I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really understand before looking at this website.
Oh, yeah. Interest reserves can be a bit confusing. It's basically setting aside a chunk of the loan to cover the interest payments during construction. So the developer doesn't have to pay that interest out of their own pocket while the project's still going on.
So it's all about managing cash flow, right?
Exactly. Okay, so we've got project planning funding options. Now let's talk about cost loading and something called S-curve distributions. Now, this is where things might start to get a little technical.
Yeah, it sounds a little intimidating, but it's actually not that bad once you understand it. Basically, it's a way to visualize how costs are spread out over the project's timeline.
Right, so instead of assuming the costs are all the same each month, the S-curve shows how costs are lower at the beginning, then they ramp up during the main construction phase, and then they go down again as the project finishes. It's a much more realistic way to look at it.
What blew my mind was that Lead Developer lets you adjust how steep that S-curve is. They have like a scale of 1 to 10 to match the pace of construction. I didn't think you could do that in the spreadsheet.
That's amazing. Not all projects are the same, so that level of customization is really important.
Totally. Okay, so we've covered project planning, funding, and cost loading. Now let's move on to something called residual land value.
Ah, yes. This is a really strategic concept. It's all about figuring out what the land will be worth after the project is finished.
Which is really important if you want to make sure you didn't overpay for the land in the first place, right?
Absolutely. And get this, Lead Developer actually calculates this residual value based on your profit margin or your target IRR.
Oh, IRR. That's another one of those financial terms that makes people's eyes glaze over. But in plain English, IRR just means the profitability of an investment. Higher IRR means a better investment,
Yeah,
right?
that's the gist of it. So Lead Developer is basically helping you figure out, okay, if I want to make this much profit, what's the most I can pay for this land?
It's like a secret weapon for negotiating. Now, let's dive into a feature that really caught my eye, sensitivity analysis. This is for people who like to play what if, right?
Exactly. It's all about exploring different scenarios, like what if construction costs go up? What if interest rates suddenly jump? What if we can't sell the units for as much as we thought? Lead Developer lets you model all those what if scenarios and see what happens.
So instead of just hoping for the best, you can actually prepare for different situations.
That's the idea. It helps you understand the risks and the rewards. And speaking of information, Lead Developer doesn't just stop at those what-if scenarios. They also provide what they call decision metrics.
Ah, yes. These are those key indicators that tell you if a project is worth doing. You've got project profit, development margin, cash-on-cash return, developer's equity, residual land value, all those important numbers.
And they don't just throw those numbers at you. They explain what each one means and why it matters.
Exactly. And they even break down things like net present value and that IRR we talked about earlier. It's like a mini course in property development finance.
I know, right? It's pretty impressive. So instead of just crunching numbers, this software is actually teaching developers how to think about the financial side of things.
I'm actually feeling a lot more confident about this whole property development thing just by understanding what this software can do.
Me too. But we're not done yet. There's still more to explore. In our next segment, we're going to look at how Lead Developer handles those different types of projects we talked about. We'll dive into mixed-use developments, fix and flips, and those interesting battle axe subdivisions.
I can't wait. It's going to be fascinating to see how the software adapts to those unique challenges. Stay tuned, folks, because this deep dive is just getting started. Okay, so last time, we talked about what develop and sell is, and we got a feel for this Lead Developer software. Now I want to see how it works for different types of projects, like in the real world.
Yeah, let's dive into some specifics.
Okay, so let's start with mixed-use developments. Those big projects that have like apartments and shops and maybe offices all in the same building.
Right, they're getting really popular. But they can be tricky to analyze because there are so many different parts to them, different income streams, different types of tenants.
That's where Lead Developer comes in, I think. The website talks about how you can input all sorts of details, like the number of apartments, how big they are, how much you think you can sell them for. And then you can also input details about the commercial spaces, like how much rent they could bring in, operating expenses, that kind of stuff.
It's pretty amazing that the software can handle all that. Trying to do all that manually in a spreadsheet would be a nightmare.
Totally. But with this software, you can see the potential profit for the whole project, taking into account all those different parts. It's not just looking at each piece separately. It's putting it all together.
Right, it's looking at the big picture.
Okay, now let's move on to something maybe a little simpler, like apartment buildings or condo developments.
Those are like the classic developer projects.
Yeah, for sure. And the lead developer website, they actually have a whole step-by-step guide on how to do a feasibility study for this kind of project. They say the first step is to work with your architect and town planner to figure out the size and layout of the building. You know, how many units, how big they'll be.
Yeah, that makes sense. You need that basic plan before you can even start thinking about the numbers.
Right. And then you need to figure out, like, what are the typical construction costs in your area to get a good estimate. And once you have all that info, you just put it into the software. The unit sizes, the construction costs, the prices you think you can sell the units for, all that stuff. And then the software does its magic.
The magic being it spits out all those financial projections, the profit margins, all those metrics we talked about.
Exactly. Okay, now how about single-family homes, including renovations and those fix and flip projects?
Ah, yes. The fix and flip craze. I know a few people who are doing that.
Yeah, it seems really popular. But I bet it's not as easy as it looks on TV.
Probably not. There are so many things to consider, like how much you pay for the house, the cost of the renovations, how long you have to hold it before you can sell it.
And that's where lead developer can help, right? Like if you're thinking about buying a rundown house, fixing it up, and selling it for a profit, this software can help you figure out if that's a good idea. You know, it can help you estimate the renovation cost and what you might be able to sell it for.
It's like having a partner to help you make those tough decisions. Like, should I buy this house? How much should I spend on fixing it up?
Exactly. Now, remember those battle axe and flag lot subdivisions we talked about? Those are tricky because of the weird access issues, right?
Definitely. But Lead Developer can handle those too. You can input all the specific details about the subdivision, like the lot sizes, where the access points are, all those things.
So it's not just for simple projects. He can handle those unusual ones too. That's pretty impressive.
It is. It shows how flexible the software is. And then, of course, you've got the really big projects, like the large-scale land developments, you know, where they take a huge piece of land and basically create a whole new neighborhood.
Those are massive. I mean, you have to think about the infrastructure, the roads, the utilities, getting all the permits and approvals, the environmental impact.
So much to think about. But the Lead Developer website explains how the software can help with all of that. It can break down those costs, analyze different scenarios, and give you a really detailed financial picture of the whole project.
It's like having a master planner in your computer.
Exactly. Okay, and finally, let's talk about townhouse and multifamily developments. Those are getting really important these days, you know, with the whole affordable housing crisis.
For sure. And lead developer can analyze those too. You input the number of units, the size, the construction costs, how much you think you can rent them for or sell them for, all that good stuff.
And then the software gives you that detailed financial analysis with the cash flow projections, the profitability metrics.
So basically, no matter what kind of project you're working on, from a single-family home to a massive subdivision, this software can help.
That's the goal. And like we said, it's not just about crunching numbers. It's about giving developers the insights they need to make smart decisions.
Totally. But there's still more to discover. In our next segment, we're going to go even deeper, looking at some of the more advanced features of Lead Developer, like how it handles complex financing, how it calculates that residual land value, and all those insightful decision metrics.
So stay tuned, folks, because it's about to get even more interesting.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. We've talked about develop and sell, and we've looked at all those different types of projects. Now, I want to get into the really powerful stuff, those advanced features in Lead Developer that really make it stand out.
Yeah, these are the things that can really help developers, especially when it comes to making those big financial decisions.
Okay, so let's start with funding options.
Yeah.
Lead Developer seems to have a really smart way of handling the capital stack, you know, all those different sources of money.
Right. It uses those 5 tranches we talked about.
Mm.
The land acquisition loan, construction loan, mezzanine loan, developer's equity, and investor's equity.
And what's really cool is how much detail you can get into. You can adjust the interest rates, you can put in the costs for each loan, you can even decide which money gets used first, like to use the debt first or the equity.
It's like having a custom-made financial toolbox. You can set it up exactly how you need it for each project.
What really impressed me was that you can even factor in the cost of the equity. the developer's equity and the investor's equity. It even calculates the interest on that. A lot of other feasibility tools don't do that.
That's a really important point. A lot of people think equity is free money, but it's not. There's a cost to using it, and this software recognizes that.
It's all about being realistic,
Yeah.
right? Having a really accurate picture of the financials. No surprises. And I love how Lead Developer uses that funding table to show you the whole funding structure visually.
The funding table is so helpful. It shows you all the different sources of money and all the terms and conditions for each one.
It's like a blueprint for your financing. And they give you a bunch of different ways to figure out your construction loan, which is usually the biggest part of it. You can base it on the loan-to-cost ratio or the total sales, or you can even set a hard limit on how much debt or equity you want to use.
That's awesome. Every project is different, so having that flexibility is really important.
Now, let's talk about those S-curve distributions. This is where things get kind of interesting when we're talking about managing costs.
Right. The S-curve is a really powerful way to see how costs actually happen over time. It's not like they're just spread out evenly. It's more like a gradual increase, then a peak, then a decrease as the project wraps up.
And Lead Developer lets you model that so precisely. You can customize the cost codes. You can assign costs to different stages of the project. You can even change how steep that S-curve is.
And let's not forget about the interest calculations. The software automatically factors in those interest reserves, so your projections are really accurate.
It's incredible how it does all those calculations in the background. It would take forever to do that manually.
It really does make things easier. Okay, now how about the residual land value calculation? This is all about knowing what the land is really worth after the project is finished.
That's a key part of figuring out if the project makes sense financially, right?
Exactly. And Lead Developer calculates this value based on your target profit margin or your target IRR.
Okay, for anyone who doesn't speak finance, IRR just means internal rate of return. It's basically a way to measure how profitable an investment is. The higher the IRR, the better, right?
Exactly. So by using IRR to calculate the residual land value, the software is basically saying, okay, if you want to make this much profit, this is the most you should pay for this land.
It's like having a secret weapon for negotiating with the seller. Okay, now let's get to those decision metrics. Those are the numbers that tell you if a project is a go or a no-go.
This is where Lead Developer really shines. It gives you all those important metrics: project profit, development margin, cash-on-cash return, developer's equity, residual land value, net present value, and that all-important IRR.
And they don't just throw the numbers at you. They explain what they mean and why they matter for your project.
Right. It's not just about seeing the numbers. It's about understanding what they mean.
Exactly. And when you combine these metrics with that sensitivity analysis feature, you can really get a deep understanding of how the project might play out. You can change different variables and see how it affects those key numbers. It's all about giving developers the power to make really informed decisions. This has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about property development and all the things you need to consider.
Me too. It's been a great conversation.
So here's a question for everyone listening. Knowing what you know now about development feasibility and all these cool tools, what kind of project would you want to tackle? What would you build?
There are so many possibilities out there. If you want to learn more, definitely check out the Lead Developer website.
They've got tons of great resources. You can find tutorials, case studies. You can even try out the software for free. So go ahead, unleash your inner developer, and see what you can create. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into property development feasibility. We'll see you next time.